There is a story that has become almost impossible to escape. You may have encountered it in a classroom. You may have seen it shared on social media. Perhaps you've heard it repeated during a workplace meeting or used as an example in a motivational speech. The details vary slightly depending on who tells it, but the core remains the same. 5 monkeys, a ladder, a bunch of bananas, and a lesson about human behavior. The story is usually presented as science, an experiment, a demonstration of how groups enforce rules long after the original reason has been forgotten. And for decades, people have repeated it because it seems to explain something we all recognize, something familiar, something uncomfortable. The strange tendency for humans to obey rules nobody understands, to preserve traditions nobody remembers creating, to defend ideas whose origins have long disappeared into history. But before we talk about culture, before we talk about society, before we talk about ourselves, we need to start with the monkeys, because whether the story is true or not may be less important than why we wanted it to be true in the first place. The story begins inside a room. 5 monkeys are placed inside an enclosure. Suspended from the ceiling hangs a bunch of bananas. Directly beneath it stands a ladder. Naturally, one monkey notices the reward. It begins to climb. But the moment it reaches the ladder, every monkey in the room is sprayed with freezing cold water. The punishment is immediate, confusing, unpleasant. The monkeys quickly learn the connection. The ladder causes suffering. The bananas are not worth the cost. The next time a monkey attempts to climb, the others stop it. Eventually, they begin stopping climbers before the punishment even arrives. The group learns to enforce the rule themselves. Do not climb the ladder. Then comes the most memorable part of the story. One monkey is removed. A new monkey enters. The newcomer sees the bananas and immediately heads for the ladder. The others attack it. It has never experienced the cold water, yet it learns the rule anyway. More monkeys are replaced, then more, until eventually none of the original monkeys remain. No monkey alive remembers the punishment, yet every monkey continues enforcing the rule. Nobody climbs. Nobody knows why. The bananas remain untouched. The story is elegant, simple, almost perfect, which should immediately make us suspicious. Because there is a problem. The experiment, at least in the form most people know it, never actually happened. No scientific paper documents the famous version of the monkey ladder story. No researcher published a study describing monkeys replacing one another while collectively preserving a forgotten rule. The experiment appears to be a modern myth, a parable, a story that evolved through repetition until it acquired the appearance of science. And yet, people continue sharing it, even after learning it isn't real. Why? Because the story communicates something many people already suspect, that human beings often behave exactly like those fictional monkeys, not because evidence proves it, but because experience seems to. Think about how quickly you accepted the story when you first heard it. Most people never question it. Most people never ask for the original research. Most people simply nod, because the story feels true. Almost everyone has experienced a situation where nobody could explain why a rule existed. An office procedure, a family tradition, a school policy, a social expectation. Someone eventually asks why. And the answer often sounds something like this: that's just how we've always done it. a strangely common phrase, and perhaps one of the most revealing sentences in human language. Because hidden inside it is an admission: the behavior survived, the explanation did not. And suddenly the monkeys don't feel so different from us anymore. Human civilization is built upon inherited behavior. Every culture contains traditions passed from one generation to the next. Many began for practical reasons. A ritual may have protected a community from disease. A social custom may have reduced conflict. A taboo may have helped a society survive difficult environmental conditions. But time has a way of erasing explanations. The original circumstances disappear. The behavior remains. Sometimes this preservation is useful. Traditions can preserve knowledge, identity, belonging, meaning. But traditions also possess a peculiar characteristic. They can outlive their purpose. A behavior that solved a problem centuries ago may continue long after the problem itself has vanished. Not because anyone consciously chose to preserve it, but because it became normal. And normality is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Most people rarely examine what feels normal. They simply inhabit it. Like fish swimming through water, like monkeys living beside a ladder. Psychologists have spent decades studying conformity. Again and again, they discovered something surprising. People often agree with groups, even when groups are obviously wrong, not because they are foolish, not because they are weak, but because humans evolved to be social creatures. For most of history, exclusion from the group carried enormous risks. The tribe provided protection, resources, safety, belonging. As a result, our brains became highly sensitive to social approval and social rejection. Sometimes we follow rules because they are correct. Sometimes we follow rules because questioning them feels dangerous. And the difference between those two motivations is not always obvious, especially when everyone around us behaves the same way. Conformity becomes invisible when everybody is participating. The monkey ladder survives because every generation inherits ladders: ideas, beliefs, assumptions, expectations. Most are never formally taught. They are absorbed, observed, copied, inherited. Children learn what adults consider normal. Communities teach newcomers what behavior is acceptable. Organizations transmit culture through repetition. Entire societies construct invisible boundaries that few people ever notice. Until someone asks a simple question: why? And sometimes nobody has an answer. Perhaps the real lesson of the monkey ladder story is not that humans blindly follow rules. The real lesson is that every generation inherits a world it did not create, a collection of assumptions, norms, traditions, expectations. Some deserve preservation, others deserve examination. The challenge is learning the difference. Because from inside a system, every ladder appears permanent. Every rule appears natural. Every tradition appears inevitable. And maybe that's why this story continues to spread despite never being scientifically true. Not because it teaches us about monkeys, but because it forces us to look at ourselves. To wonder how many ladders still exist in our lives. How many rules we enforce without understanding. How many assumptions we inherited without questioning. And somewhere, right now, there is probably a ladder standing quietly in the background of your life. A belief, a tradition, a social expectation, something everyone follows, something nobody questions. The bananas are still hanging there. and nobody alive remembers the cold water.